I always wanted kids, but my husband threw cruel words at me one day, saying it was my fault we couldn't have them, calling me defective. After 20 years of marriage, hearing that made me realize I couldn't stay with him. He's already dreaming about a new life, maybe a new marriage. It felt like karma was watching over, though, because something eventually happened to him. My name is Lisa, and I'm 45. I work as a secretary in a law firm, and have been married to my husband for nearly 20 years. We have lived a simple life, just the two of us, but we always wanted children. We tried for years, but it seemed the problem was mostly with me. I went through treatments, pushing myself physically, emotionally, and financially, but it didn't work. When I turned 40, I finally decided to stop. The treatments were painful and expensive, and it felt like a waste to keep going, especially since we need money for retirement. I suggested that we could live happily as a couple, and maybe even take some nice trips since we didn't have kids. He agreed, though reluctantly. We tried to enjoy life, but every time I saw kids on TV or in pictures, I feel regret and guilt for not being able to have my own. One day, after about 10 years, I went to a school reunion. My husband encouraged me to go and even suggested I stay overnight near the venue for a mini break. It was nice to take a little time for myself since my life had been so wrapped up in treatments. At the reunion, I caught up with old friends who commented on how I'd lost weight over the years. They talked about gaining weight after having kids, and even though it was light conversation, it stung a bit. When someone asked if I had kids, I had to say no, but I brushed it off and kept things friendly. One friend told a story about her son nearly getting caught in a marriage scam, where a woman tried to get him to lend her money by pretending they'd get married. It was a scary thought, but her son had moved on, and they seemed relieved. The reunion ended, and I returned to my hotel to unwind. I tried calling my husband around 10 p.m., but he didn't answer. I figured he was probably asleep, so I let it go, though I couldn't shake a strange feeling. After that night, my husband's behavior changed. He started coming home late and often arrived drunk. One night, he stumbled into the house, flinging his shoes off and slumping on the floor. When I asked if he was okay, he snapped at me, telling me to show some respect. I kept quiet and picked up his things, but deep down, I was starting to realize just how unhappy our life had become. My husband looked at me one night and said, "Alyssa was cute, wasn't she? If only you were as young as Alyssa." I was shocked. Who was Alyssa? And what did he mean, if I were young? But by the time I thought to ask, he was already asleep. Could he be cheating on me? At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just drunken talk. My husband's a decent man. He wouldn't do that. I reassured myself. But he'd started leaving early on weekends and staying out all day, coming home late and drunk. One evening I asked, "You're going out drinking almost every day now. Are we okay financially?" "Mind your own business. It's my money, and I'll do what I want with it," he snapped. "We should save up for our future. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble later." "Then you save," he said coldly. "I already spent too much on your treatments, and for what? You're defective." I was stunned. Even if he was drunk, I couldn't believe he'd say something so hurtful. He used to be kind, supporting me through those difficult treatments. But now he seemed like a different person, cold and selfish. One day, when I got home, he was waiting for me on the couch, looking serious. "Lisa, we need to talk." "What's going on?" I asked nervously. "I want a divorce." I was in shock. "What? Why?" He looked at me with disdain. "You really don't get it, do you? I've wanted children for the past 20 years, and I'm stuck with someone defective like you. You've robbed me of the chance to be a father." "But we decided together to stop the treatments, remember?" "No, you decided. I never agreed." His harsh words hit me hard. I had done everything I could, but he'd been holding this anger inside. Now, after all these years, he wanted to throw it all away. "Well, if you sign the divorce papers, I won't have anything else to say." With a proud look, my husband pushed the papers across the table toward me. "I've already decided to remarry." "Remarry?" I asked, shocked. "Yeah, with a 20-year-old girl." He grinned smugly. "I plan on marrying her as soon as we're divorced." He said her name was Alyssa, calling her sweet and cute, and the perfect wife, not like you. Hearing that, I suddenly remembered. Alyssa was the name he'd mentioned in his drunken stupor. I felt a strange satisfaction at knowing I'd been right to suspect something, but I kept a serious face. Then he showed me a picture of his adorable Alyssa. When I saw it, I almost burst out laughing. This whole thing felt like a joke, but I held back, acting as if I was devastated. "So you want a child that badly?" I asked calmly. "Of course. You can't have kids, so we're at a dead end, aren't we?" Pretending to look more hurt than I felt, I finally agreed to sign the papers. Oddly, I felt like leaving him would be a blessing. His arrogance and foolishness had somehow freed me. I signed the papers and left him behind, confident he'd regret it one day. 1 year later, on my way home from work, a shabby-looking man approached me. I didn't recognize him at first. "It's me, Lisa. Please help me," he said. It was my ex-husband. He looked thin, unkempt, and miserable. "Long time no see," I replied, surprised at how much he had changed. "Please, can you introduce me to your firm's lawyer? I'm in serious financial trouble." I shook my head. "I can't just do that. Consultations are free, but if you want to hire a lawyer, you'll have to pay the fees." "But I don't have that kind of money," he pleaded. I looked at him, realizing he had become a completely different person in just 1 year. It was clear he was paying the price for his choices. What on earth happened? I couldn't help but ask. Out of pity, I agreed to listen to his story over coffee. "Well, actually," he began, but I cut him off. "Did that girl Alyssa run off?" His eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Just as I suspected. The moment he'd shown me Alyssa's photo, I had a hunch. She looked just like a girl who had scammed a classmate's son. At a reunion, my classmate had shown us her picture, warning everyone, saying, 'I'll never forgive her.' She called herself Sally, but she was probably using a fake name and age then too. I had a feeling my ex had fallen for the same con. So I said, 'What exactly happened?' He sighed and began his story. He'd met Alyssa at a nightclub about a year ago. He'd always wanted children, and somehow, in their conversations, he let that slip. Alyssa quickly latched onto that, saying, 'I can give you a child.' Their relationship grew, and soon he was spending every weekday at the club and weekends with her. He'd managed to blow through $10,000 of his savings. But Alyssa seemed different. She never asked for expensive things and seemed content just to drink with him at the club. She didn't demand designer clothes or jewelry, and he found that sincere. Then Alyssa dropped the bomb. "I want to marry you, but I have some debts, about $20,000. He had promised to help her, transferring the full amount. After our divorce, he moved in with her, only to realize she was rarely home, still working nights. Then one day she quit her job, disappeared, and took every dollar with her." "Did you make a promissory note?" I asked him. "A what?" he replied, looking confused. "You lent her money, right? Did you at least get it in writing?" His blank stare was all I needed to see. "We were going to be a couple, so I didn't think to do that," he said, still confused. "Really? So you just gave her the money?" I replied. "Is that it?" "It seems like you donated $20,000 to Alyssa out of goodwill," I pointed out. My ex's face showed that he didn't fully grasp what had happened. "This woman must be a pro," I muttered under my breath. "When it comes to gifts, if the amount exceeds $11,000 in a year, gift tax can apply. Depending on the situation, the receiver might be taxed," I explained. So Alyssa took the money in 2 parts across 2 years. That way, she stayed under the limit and avoided taxes. "The reason you thought she was such a sweet, innocent girl is because she knew the law so well." His face fell. "So what should I do?" "I don't know, maybe consult a lawyer," I suggested, "but it will cost you." My ex's shoulders slumped even further. "I've already spent all my savings from before we were married. The woman I loved just ran off with everything. And now, I can't tell the company the wedding's off after I boasted about remarrying. I told them I was getting a younger wife. Isn't that your own doing?" I thought to myself. I felt sorry for him, but I couldn't hold back. "Lisa, it's my fault. Please, come back to me. After you left, I realized you were the only one who cared about me. I don't need kids anymore. I'll let you do whatever you want. You must have been lonely too, right?" I knew he still misunderstood things. I hadn't loved him for months. In fact, that had ended half a year ago. It was time to confront him with the truth. "You know, it's been a year. What's with this sudden change of heart?" "Isn't it a little too late?" I asked, staring him down. "Lisa, are you going to abandon me?" His voice cracked. "You're the one who pushed for the divorce in the first place," I reminded him. He looked exhausted, completely drained. Lisa, you're the only one I can rely on. I decided to show a little mercy. All right then. Shall I call the lawyer friend of mine? He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. Lisa, thank you. I knew I could count on you. A few minutes later, a man walked into the coffee shop. It was Mr. Johnson, a lawyer from my company. John, over here, I called out. Lisa, who's this? He asked, looking at my ex with curiosity. I smiled. He's an acquaintance. Seems like he's in a bit of a bind. Is that so? Mr. Johnson said, shaking his hand. Nice to meet you. The name's Johnson. My ex seemed confused by how familiar Mr. Johnson and I were with each other. I casually explained, we've been dating for the past 6 months. Then, turning back to my ex, I asked, so what was it you needed advice on? My ex just stared at us, dazed, not quite able to process everything. Well, I think that'll be it for today, I said, trying to wrap things up. Suddenly, my ex-husband snapped back to reality. Hurley quickly left the coffee shop. In the end, he couldn't afford a lawyer and had to accept his situation. I later heard rumors that his company was buzzing with talk about his troubles. His soon-to-be wife had left him, and his ex-wife, me, had ignored him. It was a small world, though. It turns out that one of his colleagues had been in the same coffee shop, overgearing everything from start to finish. Through the grapevine, I heard that Hurley was desperately trying to find a new partner, afraid of growing old alone. When Mr. Johnson asked about it later, I explained everything. I'm sorry for dragging you into all of this, I told him. You've been through a lot, Lisa, he said. I admitted, the part about me dating Mr. Johnson was a lie. I asked him to pretend for me. Sorry for the trouble, I added. No worries, he replied. I'm happy I could help. By the way, do you have any plans after this? Excuse me? How about grabbing something to eat, if you'd like? He offered.